Hey guys, welcome to the Lunge and Lift podcast. Today we're joined by a very special guest, Mr. Mike Lee. Mike's been a coach in London for a long time and has built a great reputation through the CrossFit community mainly, but he has a lot of experience in gymnastics and weightlifting as well. Today we talk about we compare and contrast gymnastics and weightlifting, which is a really interesting discussion. Talk about the difference in approach, given that Mike had a lot of experience at university doing 3 hours of gymnastics every day, and how that compares with the CrossFit approach to gymnastics is quite a stark contrast. Yeah. And we get onto a few interesting topics like the PEDs, performance enhancing drugs as well, which is lots of fun. So I think you're going to take a lot out of this episode. But before we get into it, this episode is sponsored by the Training Stimulus. We're just closing up applications for the 2022 January intake for the mentorship. Please check out the form at thetrainingstimulus.com if you're interested in learning more. Please also check out our website, lungeandlift.com. And thank you to our show sponsors, Wit Fitness and Hytro. Please check them out and use discount codes LL15 at Wit and LL20 at Hytro. All right, let's get into it. Mike, how are you doing, mate?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on, Ash. And Rob.
My pleasure.
Cheers, mate. and Rob.
My contact's only be with Ash.
I know.
Yeah, it's nothing personal. We'll be best mates by the end of this.
Thank you for your time, Mike. Please, could you give us a brief intro as to who you are and what you do for those that might not know?
Sure. Put simply, I am a personal trainer. Been a personal trainer now for just over 10 years. Business has mainly been remote for about 5 years. That was just a lifestyle choice, to be honest, to avoid coach burnout, which I'm sure everyone's experienced. And have about 10 to 15 hours of one-to-one personal training, more for my sake rather than anyone else's. It keeps me ticking over. Recently moved out of London this year, and we'll talk a little bit more about what I'm doing from there. But yeah, being in. How deep do you want to go on this intro?
I think, I guess from my perspective, we were just saying before we started recording that Rob and I have both been aware of you and known of you through mutual friends and colleagues from the London fitness scene, shall we say. And yeah, we've not crossed paths until now, so we're really glad to have the conversation. And I guess from my understanding of who you were was a great CrossFitter, especially great in gymnastics, and just sort of a knowledgeable CrossFit coach. So maybe let's fill in those blanks and start with how you got into fitness in the first place.
Okay, so I guess my PT and fitness career started more with gymnastics. I did a bit of freestyle skiing after school and basically wanted to learn to double backflip on my skis without just chucking it on the snow like the rest of the delinquents I hung out with. I basically just had a bit of a wobble at the top of a slope one day and thought I probably should go and do something a little bit more structured. So when I went to university, I joined a gymnastics gym in Loughborough. Immediately got asked to leave because I was practicing skiing tricks on a trampoline into a foam pit. And kind of groveled my way back in, got into gymnastics and had a coach who very, very respectful part of building the London 2012 Olympic team. So he knew what he was doing, but he was very like, we do gymnastics, we only do gymnastics, like such as skiing. I guess over the period of the next 3 years, I was probably doing 3 hours of training a day, 5 to 6 days a week. Wow. Purely gymnastic stuff, and it was very strict strength work. Then when I left university, I did a chemistry and sports degree, and I was actually way better at the chemistry side because it's just right or wrong. But I just couldn't deal with like my whole life being spent in a lab. I was going to go nuts. So moved back home, which was at the time like closer to Geneva. And then about 5 months after I moved all my stuff, I moved to London and worked my ass off on this interview to become a personal trainer at Fitness First. Like later on, you realise that they don't care; they just want your red money. But when I came in, I literally not touched the barbell. I'd never done a squat. I'd become a PT. I'd never done a squat. I'd never really done a deadlift. But I had really crazy upper body strength. I think the first time that I really got into benching, I probably benched 130, 140, having never touched a barbell, because once you've been on the rings, everything's unstable. Spent the first year, I guess, being predominantly bodyweight, gymnastics, strength, almost calisthenics focused, without really being in that calisthenics scene. And then my osteopath told me to come down and try this CrossFit thing. And at the time, he'd been to regionals already, so he was a good level. And he won't even mind me saying this. He was always a little bit overweight, and he didn't look like an athlete at all. And the first workout we ever did was Diane, and I was like, I got handstand press ups for days. I'll do this all day. And so I came down thinking I will smash this workout, and I think I just ground to a halt by the time we got to about 18 deadlifts in. And I think it took me about 7.5, 8 minutes to finish that. And like, for anyone who hasn't heard of Diane, it's 21, 15, 9 of 100 kilo deadlifts and handstand press ups. And he finished in 1 minute and 52 seconds.
Wow.
And I was like, I've just been humbled by a guy who looks a little bit Michelin Man. And I was like, I thought I was fit. I thought I was strong. And I've just been utterly wiped the floor. I mean, he was already like showered and dressed by the time I finished my workout. And yeah, that kind of got me a little bit like intrigued. And so I obviously started to squat, because I was like, this is clearly a serious lack of strength that I have in my legs here. And I went from probably never having done a clean or even a squat to about 140 kilos in about 13, 14 months. And then I fractured my back.
Oh.
So I moved well from the gymnastics side of things. However, I hadn't warranted doing those movements at that intensity. And I think that's the addictive part of CrossFit, is you suddenly start to get really good at everything because you're doing things that you've never done before. And you get this buzz, and I was 22 at the time. And I remembered my back feeling not great. And it was the whip throwdown at CrossFit Thames, which I think was one of the first competitions there. And I did it, I think we came second. I did it with Ryan and Fran Calvert. It was like old school names, but we came second. And I was just like, my back just had this constant ache. And I went and got an MRI scan the next day, and the guy basically said, you need to stop doing whatever you're doing immediately because you've got a fractured L4. And he was like, you would actually, by the looks of things, have a disc problem if you hadn't got such strong back from your gymnastics days. I was like, that cannot be right. Like, I literally competed yesterday and we came second. I can't possibly have a fractured back. So I was very just like young, just go at it. Didn't really listen. But that made me realise that, okay, I have to do something different here because I'm 22. I'm 22 and I've fractured my back. And now I feel like an old man. So, it got me thinking about maybe there's a more sustainable way to do this. and I touched on it. Went down the route of being a little bit more sensible with my training, and then as soon as my back was healed, I just did exactly the same thing again to my shoulders.
I know that.
Yeah, and you're just like, I'm healed, I'm invincible, I'm back, let's go. And then after my shoulder, because my shoulders had always been really strong from gymnastics, I was like, okay, now I actually have to start taking things a little bit more sensible. And I was only 25, 20.
What happened to your shoulder?
I ended up with bursitis in my shoulder. I literally, my elbows hyperextend like crazy, but I just couldn't extend my elbow. I couldn't, so like, but I was still snatching, and I was like, it just looks ugly, but I'm managing it.
Yeah.
And that's when I started going down. Would it have been then? Yeah. I think I got introduced to OPEX and had a chat with James Fitzgerald. He was great. And at the time, I learned a lot. Went down, did the whole CCP, did immersion. And what the biggest takeaway from that for me was more about the lifestyle and stress factors. And then I went down a huge rabbit hole of looking into the nervous system and how stress affects you outside of training and stuff like that. And that took me down a way more sustainable training route. And as with everything, I think when you learn stuff, sometimes you go full in. And then I got so far in, I was like, actually, I don't like this way I've gone a bit. So I kind of did a bit of a U-turn. And I think what I was saying to Tim Stevenson the other day was, you take about 70% of what you learn from a course and then you use it in your own way. If you take 100%, I think you end up a little bit blind to other possibilities and other forms of education. And there was loads right with what they were doing, but there was loads wrong, in my opinion, as well. So I took that out and then, basically ran a gym, ran CrossFit London for 2 years. Decided I really don't like running a gym because it takes you away from the coaching. Like you way more admin, and you're also the person that, basically the buck falls with you. So anything that goes wrong with the gym, it is on you effectively. And sometimes it's things that are out of your control, but you have to take on that responsibility. And I just got to the point where I was like, with CrossFit London, I created the community that I wanted to create, because it was like, I didn't personally think it was a very nice place to be when I first arrived. It was chaotic. And it was that exact thing that people have where CrossFit is either a cult or a community. And it's a cult if people don't welcome you in. And it's a community if you feel welcomed in, no matter who you are. And it's very easy, I think, with boxes in London and other cities, for everyone to feel like it's theirs and it's a sense of theirs. They've got this ownership, which is nice, but if they don't welcome people in, it's not nice for other people. And what ended up happening was it created this like big community circle where I felt like I was just standing in the middle by myself. And I was like, this isn't nice for me anymore. And I can see what's going on and it's great, but I need to step back, or I need to go back to coaching. And that's kind of when I decided to go pursue like my remote coaching side a little bit more, and then just jump in and out of other gyms doing personal training here and there. So yeah, that was about 4 or 5 years ago now. So it was well timed, because then we got hit by a pandemic 2 years after that. And my business was already up and running. Just not
all set up for the work from home life. I think there's one thing in there that really resonated with me about bouncing off the extremes, is how I think about it, that you basically went all in on CrossFit, not progressive overload, like extreme rapid overloads, and then you went extreme into the wellness side of things, and you've now gravitated back to your new center. And I think that's a pattern you see a lot in the industry, that people tend to go all in on something, realize that they've gone a bit too far, and then dial it back. And I think it's actually a great way to learn and even
is,
from a
100%.
movement point of view, sending somebody too far, like the wrong way, to then have them find the happy middle where they're away from their compensation.
Yeah, I wanted to say the exact same. It was like that was the one point, because I just pictured myself just coming out of a whole triathlon phase. That, I'd gone so far away from strength training and CrossFit and everything into triathlon, which I loved because I wasn't great at it and I was getting better. But if I didn't literally give everything into it, because my time was relatively limited for what I could give to training, what I chose to give to training, that I just did swim, bike, run. So because that was all my focus, I was so involved in it, and everything I was watching, everything I was consuming was all to do with that. And then I realized after getting COVID, and it was when I was like, oh fuck, I can barely run now. And I was like, right, let's go back to some strength training. And I actually was able to reflect on my triathlon period. And I'm like, do you know what? I'm actually glad I did do that, because I've now experienced what a lot of my clients through the city, like a lot of them cycle, a lot of them run, a lot of them have done triathlons. And I was like, I can now actually relate to that. So that the personal side of our job, I've now got that in my toolbox. So it was nice. But as you say, being able to then step back and actually say, right, I've got a little bit too far there, maybe incorporate some of it, but not necessarily all of it.
Yeah, 100%. I after the Apex stuff with the lifestyle thing, like reducing stress and everything else, I jumped into like power, speed, endurance with Brian McKenzie, and went down a big old route of like understanding the whole nasal breathing side of things, and effectively building aerobic capacity without really chucking a huge amount of sympathetic stress on a person. And I used it with quite a lot of clients, but then I used it so much with one client, and his base grew, but his ability to suffer just disappeared. And so like as soon as we got into a tough place, I was like, now you need to kick and now you need to go. It was just like he just shied away from it, and he just no longer had the ability to dig deep, because we'd spent 90% of his life in third, fourth gear. And I was like, no, it's Fran. There's no nasal breathing in this. I need you to just sit and in this suck and suffer. It just wasn't available to him. And I was like, that is on me. I did that. And so, I think sometimes like when you go full 100% in, you're not able to take a step back. You're like, I'm so bought into this. Why is this not working? And then you're like, actually, maybe it needed something else that I wasn't willing to look at the time.
Well, now you know what's too far, right? I think that's the way to think about it. You've pushed it to its limit, and you've seen now that you've gone past that inflection point of benefit. So you need to dial it back to the appropriate amount.
I think it's funny as well you mentioned about the nasal breathing stuff, because obviously I think all the fitness professionals know, go to the start of lockdown, everyone's breathing through their nose, including myself. And it's funny because going into that rabbit hole, I actually found myself with a similar, I never took it as far, but doing a lot more nasal breathing with a lot more of my aerobic work, I then really struggled when I come to doing my, say, VO2 efforts and stuff. I felt that, and I hadn't gone, as you said with your client, where you'd done loads of, I hadn't done that much, but I noticed where I was a lot more comfortable normally going all out and being crap at like long endurance stuff, I found I switched over and I was like, whoa, I lack that ability to just go berserk. And and it's quite sad when that was something I kind of prided myself on, and I was like, oh fuck, what happened?
Redline Rob.
Redline Rob. No, I'm done passive.
The coaches in CrossFit London would call me Mark when it was time to go nuts, and it's like, oh, Mark's come out. Mark's come out. Brilliant. Just this nutter that's like ripping and gripping his 1 rep max snatch and 3 lines of pre-workout. Mark's out. There's no nasal breathing from Mark.
No.
Great. One thing I wanted to ask you a nitty-gritty detail, just more from personal curiosity, but I think a lot of the listeners would be interested too. Gymnastics is something that's not done as much as weightlifting in the CrossFit community. So when you were at uni and doing 3-hour gymnastics sessions, could you just give us a bit of detail as to what that actually looks like? Because I don't know how to fill 3 hours of time with gymnastics.
It's like now I look back at it and I'm like, a 40-minute warm-up is effectively what you would call gymnastics conditioning in a pure gymnastics class at a CrossFit gym. Like you would go there, you would do your conditioning, but realistically that was your warm up before you went and did your skill training.
Right.
And it was interesting because no matter how good you are, you always warmed up with the basics. And it's like, you know, you could walk into most CrossFit gyms and there'll be someone who's done a few band pull aparts, done a few pull ups, and now they're straight into their muscle ups, right? Whereas we're talking about like guys who are going to the Olympics and coming second, like, and they're warming up with forward rolls. They're warming up, and you're like, this is basic. They're warming up with like handstand forward rolls, and you're like, you're about to perform like triple backs, but it's all about prepping your body for spatial awareness. It's like you're about to send yourself upside down, rotating at quite high speeds and effectively like G-forces on your body. You need to know exactly where you are in space, and you're not going to get that from a few pull-ups and some banded work. So I remember the first time I went in, I was told that I needed to be able to effectively hold L-sit on the floor for a minute. And the first time I tried it, I couldn't even get my legs off the ground. And I didn't even have the scap like depression to really pull my bum off the ground either. So I was like, I am so far away from this, it's unreal. And George, the guy, would basically say, look, you're going to spend your time building a tuck L-sit. You're going to go into a straddle L-sit, which now I'm like, I find that even harder than my regular L-sit because of the amount of cramping in those end ranges. And then you work your way up there. But it takes a lot. Like if you think about 3 hours a day, let's say 6 days a week, it's like 18 hours of pure focus on your gymnastic skills. And at the end of it all, I remember I came in on day one and I saw Sam Oldham warming up on the rings, and he was doing cross and he would pull back to support, drop down to cross, pull back to support. Honestly, like he didn't weigh anything. And I said, George, how long will it take me to do this? And he was like, you'll never do this. And I was like, oh God. don't dress it up or anything. Yeah. And to be fair, like I spent 3 hours a day, 6 days a week for about 3 years, and I eventually got cross. And when I did, I filmed it, showed him, and he told me it was bad and that there were many deductions. But to me, I got cross, and I got a move that was, to a lot of people, the holy grail. But actually, in gymnastics, that is a B move. Like that is the second easiest category in gymnastics. And that, I think, blows your mind, because you're like, I mean, that is something that 99.9% of the population, even those who train gymnastics, will never achieve. And yet it is one of the easiest things that you can do as a gymnast. Like if you go down that route. So I think as time goes on with CrossFit, with weightlifting, you have a snatch and a clean jerk. You can refine it, but it's still a snatch and clean jerk. There is no extra move that's going to be thrown in here to surprise you. You know, even if you go more complex and you start looking at squat jerks and power jerks, it's still realistically the same movement pattern. It's nothing's really changing. Whereas with gymnastics, it's like a muscle up, which is effectively one of the holy grail things of CrossFit, is how a child would start their routine.
Yeah, how to get onto the rings.
5. Yeah.
Yes,
so
it's
something that I think over the next 10, 15 years with CrossFit's evolution, it's only going to get more and more complex. Like you will start seeing L-sit holds on the rings like for time. They're not very interesting, but you know, you saw handstand holds in I can't remember, it was quarterfinals or semi-finals last year when it was when everyone was in lockdown. You're like, you could see as well who had practiced, like who was actually good at standing still and who was just going to walk around in their box. Because there's a big difference between being able to control that static strength and not. And for a lot of them, they had gymnastics backgrounds already. which has enabled them. I think Katrin held it for like 3.5 minutes or something, and she didn't really move her hands maybe until the last few seconds. And so, like, the people who put that time in will be rewarded as the sport evolves. And it's hard to look at it like that because you might not be rewarded immediately. And when I first came into CrossFit, we already had freestanding handstand push-ups, but they were like 9 years down the line, and I had to get a lot better at other things before I could even demonstrate that I was good at these things.
Do you know? I think when you said about the warm up thing, like how 40-minute condition. I remember when I went through a bit of a gymnastic phase, and someone that I worked with at Virgin, he's all about calisthenics, and he's incredibly strong at those movements. And he was teaching me how to basically do a lever. And that was for a big guy. That was always my thing I wanted to get into, and then the handstand. But one of the things that always blew my mind is I'm sitting there doing like wrist rolls, and I'm like, as you say, like priming the body, and actually all those little things, and realizing that actually before we even got into anything on the bar, I was doing so much again, like that hollow work, that keeping the positions, all the stuff that kind of, as you said, like in a CrossFit class, like the circuit at the end, maybe doing like some direct ab work. And when you do want to specialize completely into gymnastics, you do need to take, I think, a step back from CrossFit, because there is so much to do that I think CrossFit blurs the lines because there's just too much.
I think the reason that the weightlifting is so much more prominent is actually based on where people are with weightlifting at the moment. You could have had a rugby background and have a really incredible, strong foundation, and then go into CrossFit and go, actually, I'm good at this weightlifting thing. Step into the weightlifting world and be competitive. But you could actually still do that. You can't do that with gymnastics. There's just not a chance. You don't pick it up at the age of 28 and go, I've got this, like that. And I think that's the difficult thing to accept, is that you'll unlock a good amount of skills. You might do rolls on the rings. You might even get to a good static handstand on the rings. But the chance that your tendons and ligaments are developed enough to hold cross at the age of 30, having never done it before, is probably unlikely. And as you said, it requires a lot of time putting in. It's like when someone says to me, I'm going to do an Ironman, I'm like, have you retired then? Just the amount of training that going from nothing to I want to do an Ironman is cool. Right, you don't have any weekends anymore, that's for sure. So same with gymnastics. It's like you can never be too good at the basics. And those guys were pretty good at.
I think there's also an element of weightlifting is a lot easier to score in competitive fitness than gymnastics. Like gymnastics, the sport itself has a subjective component in that you're judged and scored on your execution. And I think that's a big reason why CrossFit there's a bigger disparity between CrossFit and gymnastics as there is CrossFit and weightlifting. But having done a lot of both, Mike, I'm keen to get your thoughts on, in terms of promoting a healthy body that has transferable benefits into sport and life. What do you see as the pros and cons of gymnastics versus weightlifting?
So in terms of just like the basics, like if you go pull-ups, forms of lever, core work, core stability, I don't think there are many cons. Like you can't really be too good at those things, and those things will transfer over to pretty much any sport that you then do. Like you go to a martial arts, you go into the weightlifting, and having a strong lockout, strong upper body, good joint range is never a disadvantage. I think when you go down the routes of like planche and things like that, then you're like, okay, you're probably going to end up with some wrist problems later on in life, just from the extreme angles. And actually, from a competitive point of view, I don't know a competitive gymnast that hasn't had a surgery of some sort. It's one of these things where it just simply helps to be light. And I think early on in my CrossFit days, I did 30 muscle ups for time when I was 77 kilos, and I think I would have come like third at the games. Something like that. It's like 2 minutes 15, 2 minutes 17 seconds. When I was way stronger, like I think I had about 25 extra kilos on my snatch and clean. I was 3 kilos heavier. It was like 3 minutes 40. And it's like, that's only 3 kilos. And you will not find gymnasts that really, I think the heaviest gymnast that I known that was competitive was about 75 kilos. And he looks like a monster among men. And yeah, most of them are in the 60s. Some of them are even in the heavier 50 range. So it's one of these things where it is a very specialist sport, but you can take a lot of the principles delivered through gymnastics and apply them to all your own training. You know, at the end of the day, they move through the longest range of motion they possibly can. And I know you guys spoke about squat range, and I can't remember the guys squats parallel and then got knees over toes guys. But ultimately, for most people, I think for health, maintaining good joint range is super important. Like, take performance out of it. But yeah, with gymnastics, everything is about maintaining joint range. If you have that, then weightlifting is also quite an easy thing to pick up, because the mobility needed for a snatch, for a clean and jerk, is quite high compared to simply squatting and deadlifting. I do say to people, however, like, if you're picking it up later on in life, it's very it's quite goal specific. Like, you can be fit without having to snatch. You can be fit without having to muscle up. So it's really like, if you want to go down these things and you want to unlock like athletic endeavors just simply because you want to, great. If you're into like power training and speed work, these are also really great things to have in your tool belt. But it depends on the amount of time you have. Like, you can't really fall down the route of gymnastics without dedicating a lot of time to it. So what do you have available to you? Because if your 1 hour of weightlifting means that you actually have to spend good 20, 30 minutes warming up your wrists and getting into comfortable positions before you lift, it might not be the best thing for your fitness. Like, you could probably get fitter by doing other variations of training. But again, if you want to enjoy it, then go for it.
I know it's a tough question, but if obviously you treat all your clients differently, but in terms of fundamental cornerstones that you want to see in somebody's rounded program, which do you pull from gymnastics? Which do you pull from weightlifting, if any, from either side of the spectrum?
Range of motion is definitely one that I pull from gymnastics. And ability to hold tight static positions is definitely one that comes from gymnastics. Like, you can see in competitive weightlifting that actually there's people that don't move amazingly well but are freakishly strong and have still made it to the Olympics. But with gymnastics, you don't find that. Like, everyone moves so precisely. Like, they're just different levels of powerful or agile. But with weightlifting, I think you're looking at the ability for someone to squat to full range. Like, I probably wouldn't encourage someone to squat clean if, you know, they just turned into a Tyrannosaurus Rex as soon as you loaded them into a front rack position. So I actually don't use barbells with someone until they can demonstrate really quite a strong goblet squat. And a strong goblet squat can get quite heavy. You know, I've got people, there's a girl I trained in Dubai who we were on 45 kilo goblet squats because it just suits her body better than back squats. And she's only 50 kilos. You know, the hardest part is actually getting the dumbbell to her chest. So I'm like, put it on a box and we'll lift it from the box to start with. And that's like, for her, she did want to go down the route of doing more weightlifting. And I said, it was a real like, why do you want to do that? Like, let's dig a little bit deeper into that. And I think fundamentally it came from the fact that she's seeing everyone else do it around her. And I was like, that's not a very good reason to get into it. But if it's something that you want to delve into, like we can certainly do it. And I think the more we did it, the more she realised actually she just wanted to be strong, fit, and live a long life and look good naked. And I was like, that's not necessarily, the snatch is not necessarily the best look good naked tool.
It's definitely something that we talk about a lot on the podcast, and I think it's so easy to get caught up in other people's why, and especially with social media, that it does look good, and like these movements, it's like to be able to do them is great, and it's like, but I do think a lot of the time when the people that are doing them, potentially a lot of them fitness professionals, a lot of them say athletes, they might have that extra time and a reason behind it, and also they might be coaching it. So I think it's quite important to be able to do some of the stuff you're coaching, so you've understood what things feel like, maybe what things might not, or they shouldn't feel like or look like. And it's important to, as I think you let her go down that route side and think, actually, this isn't for me, let me bring it back. And as I said, when you do a proper heavy goblet squat, I mean, they take it out of you. And it's like, I don't know if I'd say they're worse than heavy front squats, but I'd say they're probably worse. And I hate them. I absolutely hate a heavy goblet squat. Yeah, I don't mind a heavy front squat.
I think I rate them along with dual kettlebell.
Oh, awful.
Like everything is streaming.
Sonny,
you can load those up pretty heavy.
And it's because then you're getting so much bang for buck as well with the upper body when you're doing a dual kettlebell. I, as an exercise, I think that's great for so many people. I just wanted to quickly, before we move on, go back to the bit about CrossFit and gymnastics. And do you, in both of your opinions, maybe, do you think maybe gymnastics hasn't kicked off as much as, or been able to get as much focus because there aren't as many coaching it is harder, and because there is so much, and I think maybe people's education on coaching gymnastics. I know I'm looking at my own experience here, and I'm just think when I'm trying to say get someone to do a pull up, I have some basic foundations that I kind of work them with and get them through. But then when I'm trying to improve someone's pull-up, capacity, apart from just doing more, I think my knowledge is lacking in that bit. So do you think that might be across the board, that maybe when it comes to CrossFit Box's programming, it's easier to program weightlifting and Metcons than it is gymnastics? So gymnastics is kind of kept ticking over and kind of doing the bare basics.
I think gymnastics is a very pure sport, and if you commit to being a gymnastics coach, you almost commit to coaching purely gymnastics skills, and the people that tend to come to you already have been immersed in a world of 40-minute warm-ups. And when you step into a CrossFit world, it's like you've got an hour, 10 minutes of that is a brief. You've also got people who've just stepped out of high stress jobs and everything else, and people want things now. And the reality of it is like I say to a lot of people, if you're coming to me for purely gymnastics programming, you're gonna have to be patient. And what I'd say to you is actually go away, add 3 lots of 10-minute EMOMs of purely strict pull-ups or strict dips or whatever you want to improve at the end of your training or before your training, and just see how you go for the next 4 or 5 weeks, because that will do more for you than me giving you 2 hours worth of pure gymnastics training. And I think a lot of people don't have the capacity to hold on to a really strong amount of pulling work in their upper body. And within a CrossFit situation, a lot of the time, a gymnastics class, people step in going, how am I going to get kipping and butterfly pull-ups? And that's not what they need, because ultimately the ability to keep going with those is really down to the endurance of your lats and your ability to hold a position efficiently. The only reason you're going to lose it is either the endurance is going in your upper body, or you've lost position and now you're using all sorts of muscles to try and replicate the same movement. So I think did that answer the question? Yeah,
it does. And I think using the EMOM thing, I think that's, for me, that's what I started doing in my own training. And it was funny because I was doing, I started out with 2 pull-ups every minute for 10 minutes. And for most people, 2 pull-ups and then you're standing around for 50 seconds. I was like, yeah, but you wait till minute 7, 8, 9 and 10, it starts to get a little bit more intense. And then I just started adding alternating like 3 the first minute, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2. Then I did all threes and I've been building it up. And it's funny because it's so just foundational, but it is an easy way to overload. And it's just like, but I think when you say putting it into the class environment, which is where I was kind of thinking at with the question was, if we had a class, just a normal class, and we said, right, this 10-minute EMOM of, say, a 1 pull-up every minute, say if everyone was on the same amount of pull-ups, no, they wouldn't be, but just using that, I think the members would be like, what? I'm not here to do this. Even though it could be a 6-week cycle that they will get more pull-ups at the end of 6 weeks. They're like, no, I'm not here to do 1 pull-up every minute. 10 pull-ups in 10 minutes. Like, no.
I've done that. I've done that into a class. I'm like,
I think it's a massive point. Yeah. It's a massive point that in CrossFit, you said it perfectly earlier, Mike, that you've got an hour, and if you need 40 minutes to warm up, people feel like they're not getting the most out of the time, when the reality of gymnastics is those foundations do take longer to develop. As you said about the ligaments and tendons have a slower adaptation timeline, so you can't rush the process. And if you want to get really good at it, it does just take longer than getting you can develop muscular strength. As you proved when you moved into CrossFit, you got very strong very quickly, but the tendons and ligaments that went along with that strength maybe didn't catch up as quickly. Like you were very strong in the areas that you had used before structurally, but not in the areas that you hadn't. So it's one of the reasons I think Chris Summers, one of the most famous gymnastics coaches out there, says that there's actually very little benefit, or there's less benefit for gymnasts to take performance enhancing drugs, because their muscular strength would improve so much faster than their ligament and tendon strength, just because they always do, whether you're on gear or not. So you would end up just ripping tendons and ligaments because you're going to those extreme ranges. They're a much bigger factor in the sport of gymnastics than they are in normal strength training. And I think that's something people don't really appreciate. And it's one of the things that puts people off the long, slow builds of gymnastics progressions, which you want to just get straight to the end result. You want to go straight to iron cross, straight to muscle up, straight to front lever. But actually, the less sexy progressions are the stepping stones towards it. But no one wants to be seen doing those because they look like novice drills.
Isn't that what happened in the CrossFit Games when everyone blew their pecs out? Because it was just they weren't necessarily used to the end range position, and their muscles are too big, and then they're trying to do these massive ring dips and like take their shoulders to these massive ranges and their pecs, and it's suddenly just like, oh fuck this, bang! Like it was a lot of the big guys.
They had a point at which they had to go to as well, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they had to touch the back of the rings, and they had to.
Yeah, so that range of motion was huge.
Yeah, but it's interesting what you said about the performance enhancing drugs as well, and it's a weird thing because I think gymnastics is one of these things where some of the largest strength gains that they have are neurological, and it's like their ability to unlock those things, and it's like it's not where you can necessarily see it, it's just how many times they've done that thing over and over and over again. And when I was at Loughborough, we're talking 2011, 2012, they were only just introducing creatine into the nutrition of these guys, and I'm like, that's something that's been around for like 40, 50 years as a staple for a lot of athletes, but it doesn't actually help if they gain 2 kilos. They're going to get worse. They almost need to be like, how do I stay between 66 and 67 kilos and maximize my strength? And most of the time it's not about their strength. They're already incredibly strong. It's just the neurological side of things and the ability to perform under pressure. And you see it all the time. It's like someone's come off the rings, performing this insane routine, and they land, step 1 foot backwards, and everyone goes, "Oh!" Like, and we just like ignoring what's just happened here. It's like, poor guy.
But do you? I think that comes then to the argument of why in gymnastics, I guess, with what's just gone on with like people with the focus type drugs, like the Adderalls and stuff like that, where you might not necessarily need more muscle, but you need more focus to be able to access that neural drive, that be able to really like zone everything out, right? I guess that's where that performance enhancing comes in.
Yeah, I think I put some controversial stuff up on that.
I like this.
And I was like, it's not necessarily like, yes, it's performance enhancing, but actually it's way deeper than that. It's like, how early on in the career have they been diagnosed with ADHD? And it's like, so these guys are unbelievably focused, they're laser focused. But actually, you're talking about, 5 years before they even got onto the competitive scene, they were almost being groomed with that drug.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying like, I'm not saying that they don't necessarily have ADHD, though I am questioning that a little bit. But I'm certainly saying they don't know how to perform without it because it's just been a staple. And so when I think the whole thing was that Simone Biles stepped into a spotlight where actually it's a prisonable offence to have Adderall in that situation. And so if she's off Adderall, it's not necessarily on her. Like, she's performing at the highest level under immense pressure day in, day out, and no one can take away the fact that she is by far the best gymnast that has ever walked this planet, especially on the female side. But it begs the question, like, how many, and in what other countries as well, are they being put onto those focus drugs? And the thing is like, I've in university as well, I've taken modafinil before, purely because a friend had some, and I was like, this made me want to do the thing I wanted to do over and over again until the drug ran out. I think I used it as a day for studying, but I literally didn't leave a library for 9 hours. I pretty much read the textbook from back to front, but I didn't eat. I didn't do anything else. Didn't eat. I don't think I even went to the bathroom. And I was like, I don't think this is for me, because I'm like, this is making me feel a bit weird. And so they're super potent. They're super, like, they're messing with chemicals in your brain that the things that you can't see, and that's like. And this is a big old tangent, but like we can.
Ash and myself have had those kind of chats, and there's like, we had some of them on air, some of them off, and it's because it does start to question. I think I like the way you put that there, as in they've probably been groomed for like prior years to get to this, so it's part of them, and it's not her fault that she's doesn't know how to do anything, or doesn't know how to do anything, but doesn't know how to perform at her highest off of it. So it's not her fault, because if she's been, the whole time she's basically been put to this position, that's been okay, and it's been okay for her. So it wasn't her fault that then this country says, do you know what, you're not allowed it. It's like, whoa, okay, crap, what do we do now? And it shows. But then I guess it comes up to your morals, as in what you think is, do you see this as a performance enhancer where other people can essentially use it if it's... It is a really tricky one, because I think a lot of it comes down to morals on how you feel about it.
I just know that, like, my mum teaches in a school, and she said she teaches at the international school, and she says the amount of American kids that are ADHD when actually they're just a regular 7-year-old.
Yeah.
So, like, 7-year-olds don't necessarily concentrate the way you want them to concentrate. But I think there's this demand on kids to do what we expect of them, and like, actually they need to just play and throw mud around sometimes. And that doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with them. They're just going through that stage of learning. So pumping them full of drugs so that they can laser focus on the thing that you want them to laser focus on, so that they can be the next big thing or whatever it is quite tough, and it's definitely a questionable thing.
And do you know, it's funny you say this as well, because I've got quite a few friends who've all got kids similar sort of ages, and people that have got boys compared to girls, how they've developed. Like, one of my friends, his kid, he probably got ADHD or something like that, and like, so they're already saying that he's got like something wrong with him. He's like, or maybe he's just a boy. Like, boys are little shits. And this is the thing, it's like, because when we was younger, so when I was, say, I'm 32 now, so when I was like probably that age, I would have been a little shit. And like, but they didn't have this label. It, oh, you got ADHD. Or something. It's just you're just a little shit because you're a boy, and that you grow up and you eventually get into it where girls are different. And it's funny because we're so fast to put labels on things now, especially in America where it's, you know, obviously they've got drugs for everything and they advertise them to you, and it's different. It is different over there, and it's probably also why they breed some insane athletes.
Yeah, and there's that pressure to perform, especially I think if your parents are high performing people, whether no matter what industry it might be, you might be in the finance industry, but actually you want your child to be a high performing golf athlete. And you're like, that requires laser focus. So you will do this and you will do this every day. You will go to practice, and they're huge on their sports, right? Because ultimately that is also paid scholarships. It's being paid at college level, and I'm gonna have to let the dog out. It's paid scholarships. There's just constant pressure, and it's, you know, people definitely go down the route of taking performance enhancing drugs from a physical and strength perspective to be able to physically perform better. But I think it's almost swept under the carpet that the mental focus is, you know, if someone has the ability to recover and they're laser focused on that thing, you are still performance enhancing, taking performance enhancing drugs. You're still doping, because I'm removing my down days effectively. I'm always there, no matter what. I'm focused. This is my thing. So yeah, it's tangent, but it's, it's
I think it's a massive point. Like the definition of performance enhancing is essentially arbitrary. Somebody's opinion says this is okay and this isn't, because caffeine and creatine are proven performance enhancing substances, but they're legal. Like there's a dosage on caffeine, but and modafinil, Adderall, these are all in the grey area where they're prescribed as medical necessities for some people by a doctor, but to someone else, they're illegal.
As far as I understand, that the testing at the Olympics for even something like testosterone is just a baseline. So, you know, technically, if you were way below that baseline, but athletically you were smashing it in every other area, you could probably dose all the way up to that baseline and still be completely undetected, because there's no one right testosterone. So they've basically taken the average of the highest people and then knocked it up a little bit. So it's you know, it's mad in that sense, because I guess it's where you go down the route of, like, you know, some female athletes with naturally higher testosterone levels come in as a freak of nature, basically, in the same way that, you know, Michael Phelps doesn't develop half as much lactic acid. So it's like, well, you know, we're going to get into a very political discussion here. But it's hard, because you're right, like, performance enhancing is completely subjective. You know, I could say that person concentrates better than me, and therefore I should be allowed to take Adderall. If you want to level playing.
I mean, you can make an argument either way, and I think there's plenty of examples with, like, exercise-induced asthma and like endurance sports. People all seem to have it who compete at the highest level, just by coincidence. But from one subjective topic to another, something we like to ask all our guests nowadays is, what is fitness to you, and what's your current training like?
My current training is a mixture of fitness and performance. So I'm well aware that some of the things I do don't necessarily contribute to living long. They put more strain on my joints than necessary, but they're also things that I want to pursue. Like I really, really want to get 200 kilo back squat, and having started my career with, you know, like an 80 kilo back squat and a 140 kilo bench, it's just one of these things that seems to be taking an extremely long time. I'm not close to that yet, but it's always been for me that, because I move well and I'm explosive, I'm also very close all the time to the line of being injured. because I have a shocking deadlift. So to me, my deadlift is probably about 180 right now, but my front squat is like 165. So like I would love for me, my training is about becoming a bit more resilient, and ultimately that is get a stronger squat and a stronger deadlift and be able to handle a little bit more load without testing my joints so much. What fitness is to me is your training should be contributing to quality of life. So everything you do in the gym should be making life outside of the gym better, and that's across your entire lifespan. So if what you're doing in the gym at 40 years old is making you feel good and look better, but actually is going against the ability to get out of your chair by yourself when you're 80, it's detrimental. It's not fitness anymore. You're potentially chasing in the moment performance. So yeah, I mean, that to me is what fitness is it's something that should be contributing towards longevity and health. And it's very separate from performance. And there's nothing wrong with chasing both now and then. But I probably won't be chasing performance at the age of 60. I'll be a bit more. I'm using up my younger years.
Amazing. That's a great answer. One thing we wanted to talk to you about was coaching styles, and something we talked about in person was how different people respond to different approaches. Some have need a little bit more TLC, others need a little bit more challenge. Could you give us your thoughts and things that you've learned over the years on that, please?
Yeah, so when I have a consultation with a client, it's a conversation that isn't necessarily us doing physical work in the gym. It's me getting to know the person and seeing how they're going to respond. Because one of the quickest ways, I think, to lose a client, or which, for a trainer has a monetary value, but also for a client, it puts them off fitness potentially for life. The amount of people I've seen who have had a personal trainer, like, it just wasn't for me, and you want to get into that, so why wasn't it for you? And it's just, usually it's a mismatch of in terms of where their goals were, and it's the coach has seen their world through their specific filter and made a lot of assumptions that weren't necessarily in line with what that client wanted. A good example, effectively, is that if I set a weight for someone, let's say this is someone with a very feminine style brain, and their fears tend to revolve around approval from others and a loss of love in that sense. If I set a weight for someone and then they fail, it's not themselves that they're disappointed in. They feel like they've let me down, and they shy away and they stop believing in themselves. Whereas for someone that is a bit more hyper masculine, when I say that, think caveman era, I am just driven by things that appear to be very hyper masculine things. I could say to someone, stick to 100 kilos today because I don't think you've got 110 in you, knowing fine well that they're going to go put 110 on the bar, and they'll be like, I'm going to prove him wrong. And it's knowing your athletes in that sense is so important to get the most out of them. Because it's if you had someone with a weightlifting meet, going bank 10 kilos below what we think you could open at, they'll be like, why am I doing that? Whereas someone who wants a bit more hand holding, that might be great for them. Whereas for me, if someone said, if I was planning on hitting, let's say 120 on a snatch, and someone said, go open at 80 to bank it, I'd be like, sod off. Go open at 105. I'm going to open pretty close to my what I want. So I think drawing from experience over the years, when I look back at my gymnastics coach, it was constant you aren't good enough to be doing this. And he was a lovely guy, but that's just how he was with me. He just saw me as this like guy who came in at the age, like didn't really take it seriously. And to me, I was taking it seriously. Like me dedicating 3 hours of my day to doing gymnastics was me taking it seriously, but I wasn't dedicating my whole day to it. And it was like, you'll never do this. Yes, it was okay. There's many deductions. And I think I said to Ash when we met the other day I left uni, I went in and I said to George, I was like, George, I want to thank you for the coaching. I want you I really appreciate everything you've done for me. And he goes, when you came here, you have no muscle. And now you have small amount of muscle. And I was like, that is the nicest thing you've ever said to me. I'm just going to leave it at that. Let's leave it at that. But he was someone who just constantly challenged me. And I rose to that challenge. And what I was saying before this was like at A level, I got predicted a D in chemistry. And then I got 1 mark off an A in my actual A level. Because I was like, I'm going to show this guy. And to be fair, I deserved to be predicted a D because I dicked about the whole of AS level. So I fully deserved that. But it was that moment where you're like, all right, you don't believe in me, I'm going to show you. Whereas for someone who potentially takes things a bit more personally or is very much someone who relies on the approval of others, if they were predicted a D, it would be so disheartening that they almost go into a shell and be like, I'll never be good enough, so I'm just not going to try anymore. And so like understanding how each client responds to different things basically shapes the way I speak to them and their program. It's like, it's a weird thing because if I just put my own biases on, everyone would be just challenged. I'd be almost like militant with them, but that's just not how people are. And most people are a massive mix of different personality types. And so whilst they might appear like a type A go-getter, hard ass, they might be this underlying thing where actually they're seeking your approval. And just now and then going, mate, you are crushing it at the moment. Like, just takes them to the next level. It makes them feel really good, or just saying like we're proud of everything they've achieved. And it's weird to say that to someone who appears like everything washes off, like nothing hurts them. And you guys will see it, especially where you are. Like you get the trader, the banker types, and it's like they almost come in with a hard persona. Like, but actually, everyone is a mixture of everything, and the way you speak to someone, even if they don't let it show in the moment, can eat away at them. And like I've made the mistake sometimes of like setting a weight that is too much for someone and probably too much for their goals, because actually they don't give a shit about 1RMs, and 1RMs to them are like, this is the moment where I prove to my coach that I can do it. And it's, if they fail, which they might, it's awful for them, and it sits with them for a long time. So yeah, that's, getting the most out of people is about understanding the person in front of you. For me, less so than the program, because if they're bought into the program and they're consistent with their program, it doesn't really matter. Like they'll, like, as long as you're obeying by normal principles, like it's more about how you've made them feel. Like if they're going into a session already doubting themselves because of conversations that you've had, the program's irrelevant. I've had coaches in the past where I just didn't feel like we were on the same page. And I'm like, I know that you produced great athletes in the past, but the conversations we're having just don't seem like you've listened to a word I've said. So I've gone in and I've gone, I'm going to do A, B, and then I'm just going to go do my own thing. Like I don't feel the need to obey, to stick to this program, because I'm not even sure if this guy has my best interests. So yeah, that's kind of the way I approach training with people. Is like understand what's going on outside of their life as well. Like are you coming from a busy job? Are you coming from like a family? Do you feel like is it using training to escape, or are you using it to actually build yourself up? Like, and I think that conversation about how they respond to certain situations. Sometimes I have it with them. Sometimes I'm like, "This is how I coach you because you are like this," and sometimes it makes them think about how they respond to other things in the rest of their life, like how they respond to specific emails at work. And actually now you've shown them that, okay, I'm getting upset by this because that person seems like they're doubting my capabilities. How can I view this a different way? Now they're coming into training better because they just handled their day better. And like I don't really like the whole like life coaching advice, but it's more the way I've learned to coach the person in front of me often transfers to other areas of their life which are actually quite helpful. And I don't think and people don't really forget that. Like when you kind of find that revelation for them. Like actually, I've been dealing with this for like 10 years, and sometimes the athlete that's signed up with this coach has got the best results because they're actually just the same person. Like, you'll see it all the time in a regular gym. The PT who is the biggest PT in the gym is probably training people who want to look massive. Like they haven't signed up to that guy for mobility and flexibility training. That's just the reality of it. Is you tend to attract who like similar people to who you are, and actually like I'm quite empathetic. I'm quite a compassionate coach, but what drives me is almost being doubted and being challenged. But I don't necessarily show that on a daily basis. So I do end up with people who, to be honest, like need a bit more support, and people where like I'm taking a bit more interest in everything outside of training as well, which can be draining sometimes. Like you do take on other people's problems, but like that's for me to work on. Really, it's not for them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think it's a common trend you see, not even just in the fitness industry, but once you've got a certain level of technical proficiency, the nuts and bolts of your job, then actually the softer skills are where the next level of benefit is derived. That how to manage individuals, and something that Rob says a lot is that on that given day, who's turned up to train on that given day, because if they've had no sleep, if they've had a high stress day, then you need to manage them slightly differently. And yeah, I think it's a really important point for coaches and athletes to appreciate that how they communicate with their coach or athlete, and how they communicate with themselves as well. Like what's your internal narrative of, am I motivated because I think I'm not good enough, or am I motivated because I really want to achieve something? And once you have a bit of awareness of that, I think it really opens up a level of progress that people don't anticipate from thinking, essentially.
Absolutely. And I also think that opens them up to like being a bit more aware about themselves, and then not only transferring skills from training to outside life, but then they start to understand why today is a 70% day. Today is a 60% day, because you've had a lot go on today, and you're going to get your 60% today is actually what your 90% would be on a great day. And so they then treat their fitness as this ongoing thing, rather than being like, well, I have to hit that number today.
Yeah.
And when they inevitably don't because their day's been terrible, beat themselves up about it. So I'm like, take your win from the day. You came in today when it would have been way easier just to go home, and you hit a really solid looking 70 kilo snatch. And like, I know you wanted to hit 80 today, but you're going to turn up tomorrow and you're going to feel better for actually coming in today. So yeah, I think the more you get to know someone, the more personal you are. And Jens and I spoke about this. It's, you're a personal trainer. Let's not like move away from that, because I think a lot of people tend to go, okay, I'm more like movement specialists, or like they dress up a name, but ultimately, like, we are all personal trainers. Like, what you specialize in is different from each trainer to trainer, but ultimately we are all personal trainers, and it's rather than hide away from that title, because the, like, I guess the social connotation is quite a basic job. Like, I know it is, at least it definitely was for like my dad when I started.
Oh no,
So you just
it
got
is.
that
You're right.
Like, let's advance the level of what people understand a personal trainer to actually be. When you come in and you give someone a knowledge bomb that's actually changed their life, they're like, I got that from my personal trainer. You didn't have to sign up to like a therapist with like 9 years degrees.
It's when it does come to like those type of takeaways for clients as well. I think they're massively underrated, and I think sometimes personal trainers don't realize the impacts that they can have on the clients that they train, and sometimes the clients don't tell you these things, but you most likely are making a positive, as long as you've got good intentions and you're always there for your client. And that's the thing. I think I've said this in previous podcasts with Ash and stuff, and how like the first part of the session was always the part of the session to see who, as Ash said, see the person that turned up that day, and also then educating them enough so they start to understand more about the journey of it, rather than the day's win, as you said. Because like, if they were wanting to hit 80 and they only hit 70, but like when you said, that's like 90% compared to, and I'm changing it. Oh, I've lost it. But basically, being a 60% person on that day and it feeling like 90%, you're still getting the same sort of adaptation. Yes, your strength may not increase, but you're on that particular session, but you've still got the same stress on the body. And that's, I think, where when you're not in the fitness or you're not a personal trainer, it can be misunderstood that the weight is the goal, when it's not. It's the stimulus from the load, not the load itself. And that's where sometimes it can be a bit misunderstood as when it's just a passion for someone. They're thinking, I need to be getting stronger. I need to be lifting more. It's like, well, actually, today is not the day for you, but tomorrow you're going to be better.
And I think it's really important to make analogies that hit home with different people. And I say, look, is it better that you came in today and you saved £20 today versus the normal £30 that you save, or is it better that you save nothing at all? Like, I know you want to hit your target of saving £30 every day, but think of it this way: you coming in and trying to max out is like you throwing all the money you've got on a casino. It might work, but you might also lose all your money. So come in, £20 saving, you're good to go tomorrow. Tomorrow you can reassess what you need to save tomorrow. And I think that's what do you have in the tank each day is really important for clients to understand, because if they're coming in every day and there's nothing in the tank, it's a big lifestyle change that you need to make. And I'm like, I know you want to hit these numbers. I know you're coming in empty tank every single day. So maybe you need to start training in the morning before your day has gone terrible. Right? Maybe you need to start eating more. Maybe you need to start prioritizing sleep more. And sleep's always a tough one for a lot of city workers, because they're trying to squeeze so much in, right?
Yes. So I always say to my clients, it's like the morning is the one part of the day that you have control of. So it's like, use it. If fitness is a priority to you, wake up that bit earlier and get it in. Because once you enter that office, I used to have like all the time when I was like early personal training times, and I used to have evening clients, and the amount of cancellations I'd get, like my 4 and 5 would cancel, and my 6 wouldn't, and I'm like, I just stopped training lunchtime. I stopped training evening clients because of where I was based. I was just like, I'm not about that, so I'm just going to fill my front part of the day, front load it, and it worked better for my diary, because then I had to think about my personal well-being as well. And when you, as any coach knows, early days you kind of take what you can to find, and you do what you do to build up your business. But once I got to the point, I was just like, oh fuck this, I'm not hanging around till 6 o'clock for one client, just not doing it, because it's
I used to do 9 p.m. clients.
Oh mate,
exactly the same thing, 9 p.m. clients coming out of their jobs at 8 o'clock, and and they're like, I've got to get a session in before we go for client drinks. I'm like, your life is the worst, but you're making my life pretty bad as well. Yeah.
Mike, we're up on time, so just want to say thanks so much. It's been a really great chat. Enjoyed having you on.
Yeah, thank you.
Where can the listeners find out more about you?
MikeLeePT.com is our website. I don't update it as much as I should, but something on the to-do list. And Mike Lee PT on Instagram. I'm pretty good at responding there. So, yeah, that's pretty much where you'll find me. One-to-one coaching generally be Fridays in London is when I come in and kind of do all my back-to-back work. Otherwise, everything else is remote. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you very much.
No, thanks, guys, for having me. It's a good chat. We've clearly got way more rabbit holes that we could get.
Oh, God, yeah.
We'll do part two. Part two.
Yeah.
For sure.
Start with PEDs.
Yeah. Cheers, mate.
No worries. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike, for coming on. Really, really enjoyed that one. Really interesting to kind of hear your insight, especially into like the performance enhancing side of stuff. It was definitely look forward to getting you back on to maybe dive a little bit deeper into that subject. If you did enjoy it as much as I did, it would be great if you could leave some feedback. Head over to the Apple iTunes and Apple Podcasts, that's the one. Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review if you would like to. And little cheeky comment wouldn't go amiss either. And if you would like to keep up to date with all Lunge and Lift stuff, maybe get someone something cheeky for Christmas that you still need to get, check out our website, lungeandlift.com. Head to our We Recommend page, and we've compiled a list on our Amazon affiliate page. It will help support the podcast. And if you do want to also give a little Christmas gift to the Lunge and Lift team, head over to YouTube and subscribe. We're up to 68 subscribers at the moment. Oh, how many we're at? Yeah, about that. And it'd be great to kind of see that grow. And share the message. Thank you for your time. Ash, anything to say?
No, thank you
Just
very
Merry
much.
Christmas.
And have a Merry Christmas. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, guys. See you next week.